Your home for principles, not politics. It's the Seth Leibson Show. Now, here's Seth.
Welcome back. Wednesday, November 18th, 2015. One of the best things about America is we know how to move on and forget. One of the worst things about America is we know how to move on and forget. After 9/11, as I like to say, we went on a countrywide learning spree to understand a region and elements of a religion we hadn't thought much about or studied much in many years, if ever, and we educated ourselves. One of those great educators is our good friend, my permanent co-host, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. And I think somehow we need to educate ourselves again after last Friday. Dr. Jasser, what do you think?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, these attacks are getting closer. They're getting more significant. And part of it is, even though it's been not even close to enough, part of it is because we're beginning to attack them in their home base in Raqqa. But the other thing is this virus is spreading, and they want to create chaos and advance their cause. So until we destroy them, the radicals I'm talking, they will not go away. And until we defeat the ideas, they'll keep coming back.
I was talking with someone you may or may not know. He worked in the Bush White House last hour, Noam Neusner. He was making an interesting point. I don't know if you of course you've seen this. You're on Facebook, where after Friday, many a Facebooker changed their profile picture to include, an image of the French flag. And he thought a couple of things I thought worth talking about. One is, this isn't the first terrorist attack in the first country to face terrorism. Why all of a sudden just the French flag? And today Nigeria took a big couple of hits, dozens killed. Is anyone going to put up the Nigerian flag on their profile covers, which he did? And it seems to me just kind of an easy thing for people to do that. But when the policies get tough, what are these people who are in sympathy with France or Paris willing to do? Are they willing to go for ground troops? Are they willing to use the kind of language you just used, destroy ISIS where it lives, where it exists, take it to them, hit them, be Churchillian about this? And the answer is so many times no.
Yeah, and, it's sort of this hashtag sense of completion where we saw the First Lady do the hashtag Free Our Girls, and they thought they did something, and those poor 200 girls still are somewhere lost with Boko Haram over a year later. And, the social media has a way to spread good ideas and defeat bad ones, but it can also make us feel like we're doing something when, in fact, we're doing little. I will tell you, I do like to see nationalism in response to these things, sure, because that is ultimately the antidote to this. So the Muslims who put the French flag on their, Facebook page are going to be the ones that are allies. I guarantee you, no even early stage Islamist is going to put the French flag on their Facebook thing. So there is some value to it, but it's certainly not going to win any wars.
That value I totally agree with. I have a larger problem with so many people I know on Facebook who support the guy whose Secretary of State said Assad was a reformer, who support the guy who put an ambassador back in Damascus after Bush took him out, who support the guy who threatened a red line and then didn't follow through, as opposed to we who have wanted to take Assad out and do something about it. They who attack us. That's the people I have a gripe with. I totally agree with you. The Muslims who stand up and put the French flag over their profiles means actually a little bit more. It does mean they're willing to say to their fellow community and those who know them in the Muslim community, this ain't us, baby, this ain't us.
Exactly. And, today in a soccer match in Turkey, they had a national moment of silence before the game, and all of a sudden there were cheers that interrupted that moment of silence in honor of France because they were playing Greece. There were people screaming and saying Allahu Akbar, and it was a disgrace. And was that a majority of Turks? We don't know. I don't think so. But the bottom line is Turkey's been run by the AKP, which is the Muslim Brotherhood version of Turkey, for some years. And, sort of, ladies and gentlemen, that those cheers are the stage one of radicalization. And because they don't, Turkey's with us against ISIS, and even those cheering Allahu Akbar probably, detest what ISIS is doing militarily and humanistically, but it's still their guys. It's still their team. They don't like the secular states. They hate Europe. They hate Israel. They hate America because we don't stand for the Islamic State nationalism, regardless of how bad it may be. That's their team. It's their family. So ultimately, that's where radicalization starts. And until we have a long war against the concept and the idea of the Islamic State, we're never going to get this.
It bothers me that those who were Turkish, who shouted Allahu Akbar during this moment of silence, had to be from the country where our president had to speak about how this is not going to be. We do not need to speak of American victory. I mean, his choice of location to denigrate America and the West is excruciatingly peculiar, has been since 2009 when he's been around the world and went on apology tours. Today this week he was in Turkey and spoke about how he doesn't want to hear about American victories. Why not? Why can't we have an America? What's so bad about it? A lot of people would like American victory. We can get to this refugee crisis. I bet these refugees would like an American victory.
They're coming. That's why they're coming this way and not towards Saudi Arabia in droves, is that there is something inspirational about the American dreams, about liberty, about freedom. There's something that drove the Arab awakening initially, and now they're being decimated into the 7th century, But the bottom line is this president is not only reluctant, he completely detests global leadership. He started with an advisor, Fareed Zakaria, who wrote a book called The Post-American World, and that's sort of the mantra that this president has had, that regardless of how much the world needs him as not only our commander-in-chief but a leader of the free world, he entirely rejects that role and will do anything possible to stay away from it and let others lead. And unfortunately, a world without America leading it will continue to circle the drain.
It's basically the world we're beginning to look at. See, this is what worries me, Dr. Jasser, and we'll talk more about the refugees in a few moments. It's from a country well. But, Dr. Jasser, this is what worries me about the long fight. Maybe it's not long. It bothers me to even utter that. But sometimes I just get the feeling after this past week that they're just getting started as we are winding down, as we are self-exhausted, as we are retreating. That's what scares me more than anything.
They are filling the vacuums that they find a moment of opportunity. They wait generation after generation. They don't care if they're in prison under dictators. When they get out, they get back. The Guantanamo prisoners, we let them out. They go back to fight. They even after being in jail for years. So these guys are wired differently. It's not about the now. It's about the hereafter for them. So death doesn't matter. That's why they can't get nuclear weapons. That's why they can't get large territories. And that's why we need Muslims to stand up against us. And I know you always talk about my book, but your book, The Fight of Our Lives, is so pertinent now. I mean, this is the fight for freedom and liberty, and we need Americans, regardless of how asleep our president is, we need Americans to tell our leadership that we are not going to take this anymore, and we're going to shift the tipping point to saying that our enemy is the global entity, the evil empire is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. They are brewing these radicals, and they might be with us in the short term next month, this week, against ISIS, but in the long term, they are our enemies.
We're talking to Dr. Jasser, founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. AIFdemocracy.org is his website. Doctor, I was playing some audio or thinking about playing some audio some more from this whole Blame America First thing that Jeane Kirkpatrick started in 1984 when she talked about the Democrats opposing Ronald Reagan for his prosecution of the Cold War. And she noted how the Democrats always blame America first. And at the end of her speech, she talked about, but Americans know that what the Soviet communists have done and are doing is not our fault. I wonder right now, do you think the same can be? Do most Americans know that we are not the complicit partner here, but the answer? Do most Americans know that? Do we still have that same sense of Moral superiority. I have no problem using that phrase.
Oh, that is a great question. And I'll tell you, I'm glad you asked me, because the issue is I think most Americans know that we are the answer as far as freedom is concerned. But I think very few Americans know that there is an answer for freedom within the Muslim consciousness.
Okay.
I think that they're seeing the world divided, and unfortunately they're falling into the crevice that ISIS and the radicals want them to, which is that this is Islam versus the West. And as much as I agree even with the star Senator Rubio about his comments, it's a clash of civilizations, that we have to be a little careful. It's not; those are very civilized societies, but they are driven by a theocracy, and that's where the battle is. And I think ultimately that's where we're not even. I think it's still the late mid-50s when it comes to understanding communism, like we did in the Cold War. Islamism is still not thought to be the problem. I think Americans now are beginning to think that Islam is the problem.
That's a very interesting point. I've never heard anyone say and put it that way, that if this is to be analogous to the war against communism or the Cold War, this is the 1950s and not the 1980s. That's very well put. What obviously the corollary, scary part of that is what does it take to make Americans wake up and realize this needs to be the 1980s, and unfortunately it's probably going to be more mayhem.
Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, every time these attacks get closer, Americans wake up more. But violent attacks make us believe that the answer is military, and we can get special ops in there and fix this if we had a commander-in-chief with the resolve to do it. But that's not going to even come close to fixing the problem. The Cold War was won ideologically. It was not won militarily. Maybe militarily by peace through strength, as Reagan did from a strength perspective. But these are not huge. The caliphate's an idea. Right now it is a piece of land, but it's an idea, and it'll keep coming back unless Muslims reform it.
Let's talk about that, and let's talk about the refugee controversy on the other side of this break. Can I have you for one more segment?
Sure.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser from the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam. We'll be right back. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser from the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, the president and founder, AIFdemocracy.org, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot's fight to save his faith. Doctor, before the break, you were talking about this is going to perhaps be more ideological of a war from us, and maybe within Islam than any other way, than any other kind, and I wonder if you might take a few more moments on that. This is obviously the 989th millionth time you've spoken on this, if you would do it again, though.
Yeah, if we get in, I know a lot of people are saying, well, this is a problem within Islam, then just keep us out of it. When a quarter of the world's population are going through a fascist movement, think about how many Nazis needed to exist to control Germany and take it over. So when you're talking about the planet, and the planet of Muslims, which are run currently by dictators who have no moral compass, what will it take for Islamists to take those over when an Arab awakening is happening? So America, the West, will become collateral damage to a conflict in which Islamists start to see the light at the end of the tunnel of their caliphate being formed. And ultimately, this is the battle, and it's a battle of identities. Will the traditional, post-American secular state win, or will the state of a theocratic Islam be a Shia version of Khomeinism or the Sunni version of the Brotherhood or ISIS? It's all the same. They hate the West, they hate freedom, they hate liberty, and there is a battle going on. And for those who believe that Muslims can't side with Western secular states, look at the millions that rose up against the Brotherhood in Egypt. Look at Ennahda that was defeated in an election in Tunisia. Look at the revolutions that happened. The reason that the good guys and gals keep losing is we're really not weighing in. And secondly, they don't have the arms, they don't have the intellectual support and infrastructure. So we've done this before. We had a U.S. information agency that was empowered to advance the ideas of liberty in the Cold War. It's time for Americans to demand that our governments, our thought leaders, our think tanks, our media, our universities begin to get into this global war of ideas.
Doesn't it does it bother you as much as it bothers me? I think I know the answer, but I'll let you tee off on it. That the enemy believes in itself, and I don't know if we do.
Well, and here's the difference, Seth. The enemy not only believes in itself, but if you found 100 early jihadists or late jihadists, and you ask them what's their cause, they got the talking points down because
they have an elevator speech.
It's
You bet.
Totally down.
Yeah.
They got it.
Yeah.
We want to die for Islam. We need an Islamic state. The Quran is the answer. This is the interpretation. Boom, boom, boom. They got it.
Right.
You ask 100 Americans what our country's standing for around the world.
Yeah.
You're going to get probably 90 different answers, and very few of them will talk about liberty, freedom, and the immigrant ideology that we are the solution for the free enterprise, free markets, against communism, against socialism, all of the ideas that our founding fathers taught us in their constitutional convention that they fought for are not being taught to our kids and not being brought through in the media. Our president is more busy attacking conservatives in foreign soil than actually unifying us under ideas.
Yeah, 40 years ago, that wouldn't have been hard to find most Americans able to give you that elevator speech. Today, it's like, what's the president's priority right now? I think, what did he say? Something about global warming or maybe the gender wage gap? I'm not sure. Perhaps it's America's needing to release prisoners at Gitmo. Yeah, I mean, we have muddled ourselves, and it's awfully hard, Zudi, I think, and this is why I'm perhaps a little pessimistic. It's awfully hard to put the genie back in the bottle when you've smashed the bottle.
Listen, we have not had anyone running our country in a while that looked upon it as a corporation. I mean, obviously we're a democracy, but a complex corporation that needed to be united in how we present ourselves domestically and abroad, with a vision, with a consistency of the moral compass that we have, with representation of the prisoners of conscience around the world. But instead, we compromise our own values for the short term. We're addicted to oil that has basically complicated and compromised our relationships with Saudi Arabia and others that are not our allies. There's so many pathologies that the patient is continuing to get sicker and sicker, and the other side, they say, well, why would they blow up events in Paris? Now they've enraged, they've woken up the giant, and they're going to get destroyed. They're trying to say, how does that make sense to ISIS? Well, it makes sense because they view the world as the land of war and the land of Islam. They don't care what they do in the land of war as long as they seek wreak chaos and cause our economies to falter. They don't care what it brings on them. The rain of bombs doesn't matter to them because they have the ground. And that's why what would really be a game changer is some ground troops, and there are a few talking about that, but I don't know if we have the fortitude right now to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got your finger exactly on it, and I'll just put another finger on it too, Zudi, if you agree, which is not only is that right, they live in the world of war, but I think they live in a world that looks at this country's leadership now and kind of takes a page out of the indictment bin Laden gave us some years ago when he said the Americans don't stay for the long haul. They flee Somalia, you hit them and they run. And I wonder if there isn't some of that too. They don't really think we're the strong horse.
Absolutely. And they also have an urgency that I think Americans need to understand. Their urgency they see as the game changer was 2011 with the Arab awakening. They don't want these Muslims going into the Europe. They want them to stay to build the caliphate. They want to intimidate them so that they have the populations to build this new empire of theirs. And, the bottom line is that one of the ways to do that is to enrage the West and continue to poke it so that this is a battle between Islam and Christendom, or Islam and the West. And, ultimately, until we get people to figure that we had hundreds of people studying Soviet war theory during the Cold War.
You bet.
Tell me how many people we have on media and in universities openly talking about Quranic, Hadith, war theory, and the few that are often really are so off base. It's it's sad, and we really need to start getting into the heart of the way our enemy thinks, and then having Muslims engage. And we talk about vetting these refugees. All we need is a task force of anti-Islamist Muslims to create some mechanisms of interviewing and doing deep security checks on these folks, and you will really have a much more filter-proof, but we should do the same thing for our own security clearances in the military to prevent the Nidal Hassans and others. I mean, this is already a domestic threat because we don't use Islamism as a filter when we interview and when we provide clearances.
Well, that's perfectly well said. That's perfectly well stated, and we would well be prepared for the situation we're debating now if we had been listening to you and dealing with it in exactly that way. Dr. Jasser, thank you for everything. Belated happy birthday.
Thank you.
And may your voice continue to grow stronger and stronger.
God bless. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, brother.